cost. The opposition says that the government's proposed emissions trading scheme will cost the average Australian family $1,100 a year. Is that figure accurate?
Oh, well, what amazes me about the opposition's analysis, frankly, Lee, is that economists around the world are telling us the cheapest way of dealing with climate change is through a market-based mechanism.
But I'm asking
like
about the cost.
I'm asking about
the cost of your carbon pollution reduction scheme. Is $1,100 per year for an Australian family about what it's going to cost?
What we've been clear about with the carbon pollution reduction scheme is, yes, there are costs and there's compensation. There is compensation to households, to low and middle income earners to deal with adjustment costs.
And what are those costs going to be?
Well, this is all dealt with clearly in our papers for the carbon pollution reduction scheme. We've modelled the cost for low-income families, for middle-income families, and we've provided compensation for low-income earners.
Could you, for example, give me a number for a low-income family, what it's going to cost them per year?
Well, what we've done, the compensation we've modelled at 120% of what we predict the costs to be.
And what is the predicted cost? I'm sorry to labour the point.
Well, I'm sorry, Lee, but there's not one number because obviously it depends on household type and how many people in the household.
Well, what's the range?
Well, look, we've said to people that there is a range of costs. Yes, we're anticipating cost increases, and that's why there's the compensation. The figures are obviously in our carbon pollution reduction scheme documentation. But, Lee, the reason we're having this...
Sorry to keep interrupting, but why won't you just give me the figure now? Why won't you... It's well and good to say they're in the papers, but for viewers watching, why can you just not say, here's the range of figures? They range from, $1,000 to $2,000 or whatever the figures are.
Oh, well, Lee, because there's not just one number is the only reason I'm saying that. I mean, the opposition's running around with one number. Yes, we have put costs in the paper. We expect that there will be costs increases that households will bear. Yes, they're in the ranges of hundreds of dollars, that's right, and that's why there's been compensation in the package. The reason we're having this conversation is because compensation is in the package. That's inherent in the carbon pollution reduction scheme mechanism where you impose costs on people who are emitting carbon pollution and you in part use the revenue that's raised to compensate households who need that compensation to adjust, and the rest of the revenue assists with climate change adaptation measures as well as supporting our industries who face competition from around the world. The mechanism the opposition's talking about, what Mr Abbott calls direct action on climate change, doesn't have a cap on carbon emissions. Economists say is the most expensive way to do it, and critically to this conversation, Lee, doesn't come with any compensation at all.
The way you've just explained it, which is probably about as clearly as it can be explained, isn't that going to be very difficult, though, to sell to the electorate when all Tony Abbott has to say is great big tax?
Well, surely Mr Abbott has to say more than that, Lee. Mr Abbott is very erratic on this issue. He says on the one hand the world's getting hotter, then he says it's getting cooler. He says he believes in the climate change science, then he describes it quote-unquote as crap. Mr Abbott says one day that the carbon pollution reduction scheme should pass the parliament. He's going to advocate for that in the Liberal Party. Then he succeeds to the leadership torpedoing within the Liberal Party support for the carbon pollution reduction scheme. This is an erratic sense of behaviour, and it also shows that Mr Abbott is drawn to the extreme of any debate. But the challenge for Mr Abbott isn't to come up with a one-liner here, it's to give some content to the policy he now says the opposition has. He says he can cut carbon emissions by the same amount as the government through direct action. Well, he needs to explain to the Australian people what that is and what cost it will impose on them, because a direct action mechanism does not have compensation in it.